The Harvard Music IQ test, which recently moved to Yale, has blown up in popularity since its inception, with over 2 million participants. Included in those are many of my favorite YouTubers, so obviously I'm going to jump on that bandwagon right along with them. But there are some important questions that I have about this test before I can really trust it. What is it actually measuring? What is music IQ? And should we actually care about these results? In order to understand music IQ, we first have to understand plain old IQ. IQ is short for intelligence quotient, and it attempts to measure general intelligence in humans. The history of IQ is long and complicated and full of some pretty nasty stuff. But here's the SparkNotes version. This guy, Charles Spearman, wrote a paper called General Intelligence Objectively Determined and Measured, where he worked to find the G factor in students. Students with a higher G factor would be more likely to do better across all subject areas in school. Essentially, this was a precursor to an IQ score. The research was further developed by Theodore Simon and Alfred Binet and was brought to America's Stanford University, where it was finalized into the Stanford-Binet test, a version of the IQ test that is still used to this day. This new version of the test was able to be administered to both children and adults, and IQs began being collected in the United States at a rapid rate. Well, now that we have all this information, all these IQ scores, what do we do with it? Well, here's a hypothetical. Let's say that through your IQ testing, you identify a group of people in a certain location that have a below average vocabulary. There are two things that you could do with that information. You could A, identify the shortcomings in this group, adjust your educational plan to better serve them, and use extra resources as a way to help this group catch up in the area that they are struggling, which in my opinion is a good thing. This is essentially what we do with standardized testing. Or you could B, decide that this group is inferior because they don't understand, and thus resources shouldn't be wasted on trying to educate them. In fact, a bunch of doctors could sterilize this group so that they were unable to reproduce more people that will have a hard time with vocabulary. And obviously, this is incredibly evil and leads to things such as rampant racism, sexism, just about any other ism that you can think of, and even eugenics. IQ tests have a dark history, to say the least, and it is full of abuses such as these. If you're interested in learning more about the good and the bad IQ can do, I would recommend this video. Link in the description, check it out when you're done here. But this is a music channel about music IQ. Why am I going so off the rails with this? Well, general IQ has been a topic of rigorous scientific study for over 100 years, and scientists still can't agree on what they are measuring, or how accurate the score really is, or whether or not the score can change over your lifetime. For example, here is a study saying that IQ can be changed with training. And here is a study saying IQ cannot yet be changed with training. Here's a study saying that IQ scores will always include some error. And here's a study saying that on average IQ has raised over the decades. And here's an article saying that nature plays a bigger role than nurture in IQ. And here's an article saying the opposite. With all of this rigorous testing, we still really don't understand IQ. So how can we rely on music IQ, which is a much newer concept with much less research and data to back it up? And even though the potential for abuse on a music IQ test is probably not as high as it is on a general IQ test, this can still create a lot of problems if it's not accurate. If someone does poorly on this test, should they give up their musical dreams and seek a career change? If someone does well on this test, does that mean they can quit their job and become the next Mozart? If a certain population does better than another, does that point to a cultural issue? Or is the test not accurately testing for their culture? These are very important questions that affect people's lives a lot. And so if we're going to take these results seriously, it better have some serious evidence to back it up. And spoiler alert, this test has some real issues. The definition of musical IQ is a little flimsy in my opinion, but the test follows the definition very closely. The three musical skills that are being tested for are beat perception, melody discrimination, which essentially means melodic memory, and tuning perception. These are good fundamental skills to test, but it certainly doesn't cover everything that it means to be a musician. A comprehensive test should probably also include creative skills, problem solving, ear training and theory aptitude, instrumental or vocal skill, keyboard skills, etc. There is a lot more to being a musician than just these three categories. And one thing that should be mentioned before beginning the test is that this is focused mainly on Western music tradition. So 12-tone equal temperament is what you're going for, as well as our understanding of rhythm and beat perception, which is fine, but this probably should have been mentioned somewhere on the start page. This test would be pretty useless to someone training in traditional Middle Eastern music, for example. But okay, let's move on to my test. I apologize about the audio of my voice in this. I thought I knew what I was doing with OBS, but apparently not. I guess I'll figure it out someday. As mentioned before, the test is split into three parts. The first section that I got was the beat perception test, and the idea is pretty straightforward. You will hear two music examples, one with the metronome on the beat and one with it off. Some of them are pretty easy, such as this one. Seems to be a little easier when the metronome is clicking faster. It's almost as if it subdivides for you. So I think the first one. And some are much more difficult, such as this one. Yeah, the more atmospheric ones are definitely more challenging. I think the first one. Yeah. The sound of the metronome is a big complaint for me. It should have been something with a much sharper attack. A woodblock would have been great. This sound has a slow attack and decay, which makes placing it against the music very difficult when the two examples are very close. It just adds a layer of ambiguity to the test that I don't think should be there. Also, where the metronome rides in relation to the beat can sometimes be a matter of style or musical interpretation, which as far as I can tell was not taken into account here. In this section, I scored 12 out of 15 correct. The second section was melodic discrimination. You are given 3 melodies in 3 different keys, but one of them will contain different intervals. And overall, this is pretty difficult, especially when the melodies are longer. Essentially, this is going to test your melodic memory and the ability to hear the difference between melodies in different keys. This skill can be useful for transcription or error detection, but I'm not sure that this is the greatest way to test it. Again, some of these are quite easy, such as question 4. Different shape in number 2 again. Number 2. And some more difficult, such as question 10. Number 3. I scored 9 out of 11 in this section. The third section of this test is tuning perception, and this one can be a little bit subjective, as exact intonation can be a point of discussion depending on musical style and interpretation. Overall, this section is tough because it's not always in tune or out of tune. Sometimes one selection is out of tune and the other selection is more out of tune, and telling this difference can be difficult. For example, question 2, the first example sounds flat and the second example sounds sharp.
I could fly through the sky on the open sea. I could fly through the sky on the open sea.
The second one sounds sharp and the first one sounds flat. Some questions are very hard to tell, such as number 6, and anything with a glissando is just more difficult.
There you know that all that I have, I will share with you, with you. There you know that all that I have, I will share with you, with you.
Anything with a glissando in it just makes it more difficult. In this section, I scored a 14 out of 15, and after some magical calculations behind the scenes, out pops my musical IQ. Oh. All right. My musical IQ is 119. We estimated your score in the same way as real IQ tests do. Based on all the other people who have taken this test, we set 100 as the average, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it's scored the same way as a normal IQ test. This means I did as well or better than 89.74% of people. So my mistuning perception was my highest score, the test we just did. My melodic discrimination, I feel like I should have been better at that. That's a little disappointing. And my beat alignment, this one, out of all three, I feel like the melodic discrimination is the most objective, and then probably I'd put the mistuning second, because that can be up for interpretation on exact intonation. But the beat alignment, the way that the metronomes sound works is just brutal. It's possible that performance on a test like this could accurately predict people's ability to play a musical instrument or to sing. People who are very skilled musicians might be more skilled at being able to tell how tunes differ from one another. This is just a hypothesis, though. It might turn out to be wrong. Well, at least they're humble, I guess. So I scored 119. What do I do with this information? Well, I could say that rhythmic perception needs some work, but again, that metronome sound prevents a real objective measure of that. My mistuning perception is strong, but some of those were so close I may have gotten lucky. And my melodic memory, the most objective and the score I was most disappointed in, could use some more work. So I guess that is somewhat helpful. I guess I could also compare my scores to other YouTubers that have taken this test. I scored better than Brett from Two Set Violin, about the same as Adam Neely, slightly below Charles Cornell, and way below Ray Chen. But is that really an accurate representation of my musical abilities? I would argue no. All of these people are fantastic musicians that would absolutely blow me out of the water in their respective fields. I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves. So this result made me even more curious about how accurate this test really was. If musical IQ is really scored the way that it says it is, just like a real IQ test, the average person should score about a 100. At a score of 100, you are more proficient than 50% of the population and less proficient than 50% of the population. And it's no secret that the average person in this world is not a professional orchestral bassist, or scary good jazz musician, or a violin virtuoso. The average person doesn't play an instrument professionally. In fact, the normal interaction with music for an average person is singing along to their favorite songs in their car. It makes sense that a person like this would score at around 100, and it just so happens to be that I know someone like that. This person has no musical training, she has a normal job and doesn't play an instrument, but she is able to accurately sing in tune with a recording on the radio, and can even sing in tune without a recording in the background. I would think that someone like this is much closer to average than myself or any of these other YouTubers, so it would make sense that she would score around 100. Well, let's look at her results. She scored a 74. A 74 suggests that this person is as proficient as 4.15% of the population, meaning that according to this test, she is less proficient than 95% of the rest of the world. But how is that possible? She can sing in tune and in rhythm, and trust me, I've heard much worse out there in the wild. Well, I believe it's because the dataset of this test is highly skewed. Most people taking this test are not average. Because so many very popular music YouTubers have taken and promoted this test, often offering direct links, I would guess that most of the people that have taken it are actually their audiences. Look at the subscriber counts of the YouTubers I mentioned, and then remember that the total test takers is around 2 million. The majority of the people that watch YouTubers such as Adam Neely and Ray Chen are going to be musicians themselves, either amateur or professional. So thus, it's safe to say that a very large proportion of these test takers are musicians, and this is not representative of the overall population. So this isn't comparing you to the population of everyone, like an IQ test would. It's just comparing you to other musicians, which can highly skew the results on both sides. If an average person that is not a musician is scoring 74, that would suggest that these scores are actually much higher above average than is suggested. And the graph should look more like this. If we normalize the dataset so that the average person is scoring a 100, as a normal IQ test would, these scores become highly inflated. And as we move into the extremes of the datasets, things become less and less accurate and less reliable. The test really isn't designed for the 0.01% outliers. Once more average and diverse groups of people have taken the test, and the average is truly where it should be, the extremes can be more accurately measured. But for now, it's just not reliable. All of this to say, this test is not accurate, at least not yet, and should not be used to make any life-altering decisions. As of right now, I don't believe that this test can accurately predict who will be able to succeed as a musician, or who can learn an instrument. If you decide to take this test for fun, that's fine. I'll include a link in the description. But don't put any real stock into the number that you get. I think Adam said it best in his video.
It's basically a fancy BuzzFeed article.
If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think about this test. See you next week.